Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be sharing my story behind my custom 3D printed Absolute Batman action figure. We'll take a look at the uniqueness of this character, my journey to find the comic book, and also why I chose to bring this design to life. Absolute Batman originates from the alternate Absolute universe where the universe was born from Darkseid. In this universe, nothing is as it was in the primary universe and many aspects of our characters have been reimagined. The Absolute Batman design has sparked a lot of mixed reactions in the community. While some fans admire the big, bulky build that stands out from the traditional Batman designs, others criticize the shapeless rectangular bat symbol, saying it feels disconnected from the classic look. And personally, I find the design fascinating and enjoy how it challenges the norm. My interest in Absolute Batman grew after seeing posts about it on social media and the pop culture world as a whole, but it was my boss, who is also a collector of comics and collectibles, who really got me hooked to the comic. During a trip to Sydney, my wife and I decided to visit some comic book stores to look for Absolute Batman #1. Unfortunately, the first and second print runs were sold out everywhere and most stores were only taking pre-orders for the third run. I did manage to purchase 3 variant covers online through a store recommended by my boss, but I never got my hands on the original cover art. Typically, I let my Patreon supporters vote on figures I create each month. However, for December, I decided to skip the poll and focus on Absolute Batman. The design really stood out to me for several reasons. The bulky body and imposing silhouette is unlike anything I had worked on before. The metallic spikes and the unique cape design added to the visual interest that gave me room for experimentation. It was an opportunity to modify my base action figure body to try something entirely new in terms of form and proportion. So let's take a look at how I made this action figure and go through the details. So before we get to the video, let's talk about today's sponsors. Today's video is sponsored by PCBWay, the one-stop shop for all of your PCB manufacturing and 3D printing needs. If you're an engineer, maker, or a hobbyist looking to bring your projects to life, PCBWay offers high-quality printed circuit boards at affordable prices and a range of additional services to make our prototypes a reality. But it does not stop there. PCBWay also offers top-notch 3D printing services. Whether you're working with resin, metal, plastic, or other advanced materials, their 3D printing capabilities are perfect for prototypes, custom parts, and even creative projects. You can upload your design, choose from a variety of materials, and unbox your ideas that have come to life. I've printed multiple figures with PCBWay, so please check out my videos that highlight the materials and services from PCBWay. My base body action figures are also available to purchase at PCBWay, so I will link the videos and the figure down in the description section below. So whether you need a PCB, a precise 3D printed part, or both, head over to PCBWay.com to get started today. I'll drop the link in the description below. So to start off the process, I always sketch out my concept so that I have a reference for what I want to achieve. For this Batman, I wanted him to be bigger than my usual figures with a lot of muscles and girth to highlight the exaggerated details. Absolute Batman had so many variant covers and artistic interpretations, and my thoughts were getting a little bit scattered, so I stuck with 2 primary sources of inspiration. I went with the Things from Another World variant cover art so that Batman has defined musculature, and the original cover art for the details like the wrist straps and the size and the bulk. I then got into my sculpting process. All of the sculpt work and engineering on this figure has been done entirely on Blender. During the sculpting process, I was running the silhouette by my wife, constantly getting her feedback so that I was getting a fresh perspective and the figure would be different from all of my other figures. I wanted to give this figure some accessories which came in the way of Batman's axe. The axe was featured prominently in many comic covers and artwork for the character, so it was a no-brainer. Another distinctive feature for this character has to be its cape. It is huge, sprawling, and used like a weapon throughout the issues. The cape has this batwing-like ends on the cape, which are also sculpted in 3D to be printed and added to the cape. I also made sure to add a lot of texture details onto the figure so that the materials like the bodysuit, trunks, and gloves get added detail. However, I realized that the sculpt was a bit too light and is faint and barely visible on the final print. I really enjoyed working with the wrist straps and making it natural and wrapping. And for the faces, we have 2 variations, the stoic head and the angry head, and we wanted to make sure that the heads were purposeful, so the angry head really works with the axe in hand for posing. For the engineering process, I did not change too much from my existing formula. I wanted to update the range of motion for some of the parts and make sure that I was getting the most out of my joints. I have updated my chest and butterfly joints, so I have added a ton of articulation to the butterfly joints. For the trunks, I removed some of the thickness, so now the legs kick forward a lot more without the hindrance. For the resin efficiency, I added some cavities in the abdomen section so I could use less resin and make a lighter figure. We printed out a test version of the figure so we could have a functional figure to examine, and we found out a few things. The shoulder armor was designed to be friction held onto the shoulders, however this did not work too well, so we updated the shoulder armor to have a ball joint connection to securely connect it to the shoulder. The cape piece was also designed with pegs in mind that peg into the chest piece. However, this also did not work well because the chest piece was too thin and when heated would get too flimsy to fit the peg onto this piece. The previous design allowed for more articulation with the separate neck and cape. However, I had to redo the design and sacrifice some of the articulation for sturdiness, and I also believe that this design will hold the cape a lot better as well. I also gave the cape piece a likeness overhaul and hopefully it looks closer to the source material. So after the final adjustments, we were ready for the final print. I sliced everything on Lychee slicer and we got to printing. We used the Resi1 Tough 74 Grey resin for this print, and if you want to see more details about this resin, please check out my review video of the Tough 74. Resi1 have also sent me the second version of the Tough 74 resin, so stay tuned for a review video soon. Resin prints will usually have small knob marks due to the supports. Despite my attempts to strategically place the supports and use small supports to reduce the marks, my wife had to do some light sanding to remove support knobs to make the figure look a lot cleaner. After the sanding, we were ready to paint this figure. Now with this figure as well, we did not do any priming on majority of the figure. The only priming we did was on the belt due to how difficult it is to get any coverage with yellow. So for the paints, we used our airbrush and mostly Vallejo paints for the figure. For the base gray for this costume, we used Vallejo Sky Gray and Vallejo Black with a 4:1 ratio. For the black parts, they were just a Vallejo Solid Black. The belt was painted using a mix of Vallejo paints to get this particular yellow. The axe was hand painted using Tamiya gunmetal with Tamiya chrome silver for highlights and dry brushing, and the handle was painted using Vallejo browns that my wife mixed. We used the Gallery airbrush and the Vallejo satin sealant as the top coat. Now the cape was the section where we struggled the most, and if you follow me on Instagram, you may have already seen my reel describing the troubles we had with the cape. We went through 4 designs of the cape, so let's go through that in brief. Our initial design was kind of a ragged looking cape, and we had 5 points with some smaller scallops where the 5 major points were wired. The cape looked a bit rough and it did not add to the design of the figure. However, we did learn a new technique to wire capes. For our second design, we went with a thicker fabric with 1 straight edge and 1 scalloped edge. We still gave it 5 points for the wires, but because of the back 3 points not being anchored, they looked very gangly. For our third design, we used a thinner shiny fabric and we wanted to give it a double layers of the fabric so that the cape has a stitched edge that looks clean. This was so close to the final version we went with, however the only thing we wanted to change was the double scalloped points. Now this was the final version of the cape we decided to go with for the figure. We made this cape with only 1 scallop with 4 wired points, and the cape points were made as separate pieces with a central structure to hold the 4 pieces together. Once we had finalized the design and made the cape, we glued the 3D printed hook points to the cape. This figure uses most of the same joint principles from my previous figure, so the assembly is not very different. As usual, I heat up the socket parts with a hairdryer so that the joints can be connected with ease. So here we have the final figure on a turntable, and this is how it turned out. I'm super happy with the bulky buck on this Batman and how clean the prints and paints turned out. I particularly enjoy the amazing cape on this figure that adds so much character to him. While the body and muscles are much bigger and harder to work with, I'm really glad that I could fit in the amount of articulation I did for this figure. So in conclusion, overall, I think that this figure turned out great, and I'm super happy with how different this figure is from my usual designs. The paints, despite being simple, add a lot of depth and character, and the cape was such an interesting issue to tackle. I hope you enjoyed this video and there were a few interesting things that you can take away from it. If you have any comments or ideas, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel and help the channel grow. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.